I created a book called Winterbourne Insignia, and on the surface, it's a dark fantasy story about revenge of a bloodline. But underneath it all, I've written something that's far deeper, darker, and older, between enlightenment and corruption, between high spiritual order and the lowest, the most destructive instincts inside humanity manifesting into the physical world. These things are not included for shock value. They are part of the moral horror of the world, because Winterbourne Insignia is not pretending evil is abstract. Evil does take form, evil does use people, and evil can build systems, and in this world, evil learned how to wear a mask. Chapter 1. The Old World, the Holy Era. 2,000 years before the events of Volume 1, the world existed in what would later be remembered as the Holy Era. Resonance had not yet been discovered. Humanity was still primitive, compared to what it would become. Civilization was forming slowly, farming spread, language developed, education became more common across the world. People were still close to the earth, close to survival, and close to the spiritual forces they believed shaped existence. In this era, churches rose, prophets appeared, and across the world, people were taught the difference between God and Satan. God was understood as a high-vibrational energy, the force of enlightenment, creation, peace, truth, perfection, and spiritual elevation. Satan was understood as a low-vibrational energy, hatred, corruption, aggression, lust, wrath, sadism, and the destructive urges that rot the soul from within. Spirits were real. They inhabited the universe the way physical creatures inhabited the earth. Stars, galaxies, realms, beyond human comprehension. All of these were not simply dead matter. They were spiritual dominions, and those spirits could influence human thought, human desire, and the subconscious mind if people gave them the correct energy to manifest. That meant goodness could manifest through human beings, but so could evil. And early humanity understood the danger. The people of the world joined together around one spiritual purpose: to purge evil before it could take root. This was considered the most prosperous and spiritually pure period in world history. Not technologically advanced, not industrially dominant, but primal, sacred, and close to divinity. Humanity had not yet transcended into vessels of divine energy at this point, but it was preparing the ground to do so. Chapter 2. The Holy Union and the Meteorites. 1,000 years passed. The world entered the age of the Global Alliance, also known as the Holy Union. Human civilization had advanced. Sacred technology and relics connected to transcendental spirits began to accelerate human progress. Meteorites began to fall to Earth. Inside these meteorites was a strange and powerful energy. Some meteorites carried energy that enlightened people. Others corrupted them. The difference depended on the spirits connected to the stars from which they fell. Then came the first recorded case of a human acquiring profound supernatural ability. His name was Kurokami. He became the first documented human to awaken what the world would later call resonance. At first, this power seemed like divine proof, a gift from another realm, a sign that humanity was approaching something greater. But power always reveals what is already inside the person holding it. As more meteorites fell, the world began to split. Some people used this new energy for protection, healing, order, and the advancement of mankind. Others used it for domination, cruelty, and corruption. The Holy Union began to fracture. The world had discovered supernatural power, but it had not yet discovered how to survive it. Chapter 3. Resonance is named. 500 years before Volume 1, the meteorites stopped falling, but their effect remained. Humans who had made contact with the meteorites continued to develop abilities. These powers were no longer seen as random miracles. They were studied, classified, and eventually given a name: Resonance. Resonance was not inherently good or bad. It was a manifestation of power from another realm, descended onto Earth. What mattered was the soul that wielded it. A person could use resonance to protect humanity. Another soul could use it to abuse, enslave, and destroy. Over time, certain bloodlines were discovered to have unusually high affinity for resonance. These bloodlines became sacred. Some became feared. Those who used their gifts for mankind became known as descendants of God and the angels. Those who used them for selfishness, violence, degradation, and spiritual corruption became known as descendants of the devil and the demons. The world split along spiritual lines. The western and northern continents became heavily influenced by God. The eastern and southern continents fell under darker rulers who worshipped the devil and embraced low spiritual energy. There was balance for a time, but it was an unstable balance. Because when two civilizations believe each other to be vessels of the opposite spiritual forces, peace becomes temporary, and the first religious proxy wars began. Chapter 4. The Winterbourne Dynasty. 250 years before Volume 1, the world reached one of its most important turning points. The Winterbourne family rose. They were direct descendants of the angel Lusavia's insignia, which is the iconic Winterbourne snowflake insignia. Their bloodline carried immense spiritual meaning. They were not simply powerful. They were vessels of God's order. Under the Winterbourne dynasty, the western, northern, and eastern continents came under high-vibrational rule. This became the most peaceful and enlightened period after the Holy Era. Resonance was taught openly. It was not treated as a weapon for selfish conquest, but as a sacred force to be disciplined, understood, and used for serenity. Human beings lived and died in relative peace, but one continent remained consumed by evil: the southern continent. There, satanic rule and demonic practice continued. Ritual, abuse of women, children, and men, trafficking, beheading, dismemberment, organized terror. These were all carried out in the name of Satan, in the name of the demons, and these acts were not just rumors. They were witnessed by soldiers, civilians, survivors, and missionaries who returned broken by what they had witnessed on the southern continent. This was the moment the world made a decision. Never again would any nation be allowed to become a vessel for Satan. The Winterbourne dynasty launched a holy crusade to free the oppressed people of the southern continent and destroy the systems that enabled such evil to flourish. King Jude Winterbourne became central to this era. He did not merely rule, he fought. With his ruthless and loyal knights of the Resonant, King Jude Winterbourne battled the physical manifestation of Satan itself within the southern continent. With the help of the Knights of the Resonant, he won. Satan was defeated, Satan retreated. He was no longer a physical manifestation, but evil was not destroyed. It was only growing to learn patience. Chapter 5. The Knights of the Resonant. After victory, King Jude Winterbourne made a decision that changed the course of history. He relinquished the throne to the Galliner family, the bloodline that would eventually produce King Aethelstan and his son and heir to the throne, Prince Xylotor. The Winterbourne family stepped away from direct rule, but they did not step away from their duty. They devoted their bloodline to fighting demonic entities, corrupt spirits, and the human vessels through which evil manifested. Their temple became known as the Knights of the Resonant. The Knights did not exist merely as soldiers. They were a sacred order. Their duty was to protect humanity from spiritual corruption and prevent the return of Satan's physical form and evil's manifestation into the physical world. For a time, they succeeded. The Knights upheld peace, morality, ethics, and ultimately love across the world. Any pocket of evil was given little room to breathe, but the next threat did not begin on a battlefield. It began in rooms, in palaces, in private gatherings, in the shadows of the elite and the rulers of kingdoms, empires, countries, republics. Chapter 6. The Occult. 100 years before Volume 1. On the surface, Lusavia remained holy. It still presented itself as a kingdom of God. The Knights of the Resonant still existed, doing their duty and carried out by the Winterbourne family. But within Lusavia itself, among certain elites, interest in dark arts and demonic spells, magic, and manifestations began to spread. At first, it was hidden as curiosity. Then it became worship. And then it became practice. Secret societies emerged among the powerful. The most important of these was high-vibrational, a society that presented itself as something respectable while concealing a true religion within: Satanism. This is where corruption became intimate and finally institutional. Abhorrent sexual violences, rape, sodomy, abuse through rituals, bloodletting, beheadings, many depraved crimes began infiltrating the Western continent through elite circles from within Lusavia itself. That is what made it so dangerous. Evil was not marching at the gates. It was instead sitting in Parliament, sitting in elite circles, until under Lord Greenwich Winterbourne. The Knights of the Resonant intervened early enough to force many secret societies back into secrecy. Unfortunately, their conquest to eradicate those who decided to practice Satanism was not successful. Instead, these secret societies learned to hide it better, and that failure would eventually doom not just the kingdom, but the entire world. Chapter 7. The Deceit Conspiracy. 50 years before Volume 1, the Republic of Gokad and the Kingdom of Zriakots became alarmed by what their intelligence networks were uncovering. Secret societies had infiltrated Lusavian government and monarchy. Rumours spread of demonic rituals, satanic worship, and a plot to summon Satan back into the human world after Jude Winterbourne's ancient victory, the rest of the world began to distrust Lusavia. To them, the kingdom of Lusavia was no longer the holy kingdom it claimed to be. It was becoming a shell, a beautiful surface, hiding something far more rotten underneath than anyone besides those involved could believe. The world formed the Second Order of the Holy Union and began plotting against Lusavia in the sake of God, of higher vibrational energy, and for the greater good of humanity. But here is where the tragedy begins. Most people inside Lusavia knew nothing. The ordinary citizens did not know about the secret society of Iversul. Those who did believed it was simply a network of individuals trading amongst each other. Most people believed the secret society of Iversul was a big club. Lusavia still believed it stood with God. Lusavia believed the rest of the world had turned against it because Satan had manifested within their realm. But the truth was far worse. Satan's influence was already inside the kingdom of Lusavia, inside the most powerful kingdom, albeit a small kingdom that was highly influential. Inside the institutions, inside the monarchy, inside the royal bloodline, and almost no one could see it. Not even the king. Chapter 8. The War Against the World. 30 years before Volume 1, tension finally exploded. The Second Holy War began. This became known as the War Against the World. A full-scale resonance war broke out between Lusavia and the rest of the world. The scale was catastrophic. Resonance users fought as weapons of mass destruction. Nations were burned. Alliances collapsed. The world entered a decade of bloodshed. At the centre of Lusavia's defence stood Lord Levi Winterbourne, leader of the Knights of the Resonant and Prime Minister. He was a man who carried the burden of a bloodline created to fight evil. He believed his war effort was all for the greater good of God and the greater good of high vibrational energy, peace, love, and security. Levi Winterbourne led Lusavia's war effort alongside the kingdom's military forces. His children, Lady and Lord Rhodolite Winterbourne, became high-ranking knights and generals. The Winterbourne family remained terrifyingly powerful. But as the war dragged on, Levi Winterbourne began to see something was wrong, but real corruption was becoming far, far more evident from within the capital city, Astraeon. Inside the same kingdom he was defending, the occult became harder to ignore. Iversulian influence spread through manipulation, political control, and mass deception. The public was gradually pushed away from belief in God, the Creator, and spiritual order, and atheism spread through Lusavia, not simply as disbelief, but as a mass spiritual weakening, a shared consciousness that made it easier for Satan to manifest. Belief creates conditions. Desire creates vessels. Mass consciousness can open doors, and Lusavia was finally opening the one they feared most. Chapter 9. Prince Xylitol and the Return of Satan. 20 years before Volume 1, the corruption reached the royal family. Within the hierarchy of Iversulian society was Prince Xylitol, heir to the Lusavian throne. His father, King Aethelstan, was not presented as an evil man. He was kind, he was loving, he cared for the greater good of the kingdom, and most of all, he cared for God's beliefs. He refused to believe Lord Winterbourne's warnings about his son. Levi was connected to the royal family through marriage. His wife was Princess Sapphire, King Aethelstan's daughter, Xylotal's sister. Levi knew something was wrong, but the king could not accept that his own son had become a vessel for darkness. At the same time, Levi's daughter, Lady was drawn into the cult. She was indoctrinated and eventually married Prince Xylotal, and yet behind it all, not even Lord Levi Winterbourne, the most powerful man in the world, could stop her. This is where things turn horrific. By the end of the war, Xylotal was deceived by Satan. He became the physical manifestation of the Baphomet, the goat-headed demonic entity in which Satan chose to take a physical form. At that moment, Lusavia fell. Satan had won. It was no longer the Gallina family on the throne, but instead Satan itself. And the most terrifying part was that nobody knew except the elites, except Parliament, high society, the secret societies, the Iversulian circles. The people closest to power understood that the throne was ruled by demonic spirits, and Satan himself, disguised under the name of Lusavia. But the ordinary people did not understand the truth at all. They only experienced the consequences of the truth. Oppression, indoctrination, suffering, fear, propaganda. The empire presented itself as order, but underneath that order was spiritual corruption. Satan did not need to appear openly in every street. He had systems now. He had laws, willing soldiers, institutions, an entire empire against God. This is where Volume 1 begins. So, if you think this is something that will be quite insightful, and make a good read for you, then go ahead and check out the book. I just want to get some eyes on this book. For Volume 1, there's a lot of, not a lot, but a couple changes I'm going to make to actually highlight this newer backstory and this newer point of the book, that Volume 2 and onwards, you're going to experience a lot of the deeper meaning and the reflection of an almost spiritual war. The themes I talk about in the book are a reflection of my actual beliefs in good and evil as a manifestation in which you could call spiritual or energy, and I'm just looking to highlight how this is used in our everyday life by certain people, and how we should be a bit more critical and careful about how energy is used. So I hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, comment. Literally, if I get a comment asking for the book for free in the description, if you're interested in reading, then just hit me up, because I've got a couple things I want to change in the book just to make it better and to highlight this newer version that I've come up with, in which this backstory will be relevant. The book right now, like, it's complete, it's relevant. As to how Volume 2 is going to go, which will be released fairly soon. But yeah, anyway, let me know what you think if you do read it or whatever else. Yeah, enjoy. Thank you.